we're joined because we're talking about it. A big game tonight. I cannot wait. Sixers Heat. It's important. And I love what we do here at All PHLY. Our Sixers coverage is the best between Devon, Derek, and this man right here, Kyle Neubeck. Kyle, what's up, man?
How we doing, cuz?
Good to see you, buddy.
I know. I was thinking this morning driving over here because of when I came up and your career trajectory. It's the first time I've ever actually talked to you on air. This way, probably known each other for quite a while. Yeah, because I was on.
You're on WIP. Yeah,
while you were at the Fanatic, and
that's right.
Never the two shall meet.
Well,
so.
and which was always like that's nonsense. We'll talk about that later today too when Johnny Marks comes in. But I always loved you. You know that. I love your work. I
appreciate it.
I'd see you down at games, and I thought I would love what you do with them. So so let me hear your take, all right, off of the return of the big guy.
I mean, just the juice in that building, you could tell how much he means, not only to the team, his teammates, his coaches, all that, but the city, right? Like the last 2 months, we've been diving into, what is Tyrese Maxey doing? How can they get wins without this guy? But he's the guy, right? Like he is the franchise. And so the moment you hear, hey, he's been upgraded to questionable, all of a sudden it's like, oh, we're in for something tonight. And then, in true Joel fashion, has a pretty good game. Not his best game, but after 2 months off, he's
that's the thing. 2 months
pretty
off,
damn good.
Right, 2 months off, you're going to be huffing and puffing, right? Like,
yes.
What people don't know, and you could speak to this, and I had this conversation with Legs yesterday. And of course, when it's leg day, I go long on leg day.
Oh, yeah.
And then we geek out like two kids. Basketball shape you can't replicate.
No.
You could be on a bike, you could do it. You can't replicate going up and down the floor.
Yes.
And especially when you're 300 pounds.
Well, and I will tell you, having played basically every sport you can play growing up, even if you're in shape for, let's say you play soccer, that's a lot of like long distance running.
Yes.
Basketball is sprint. And so
short
watching
bursts.
Joel carry, 275, 300 pounds, whatever he is at this point, up and down the floor after being off for 2 months and having a knee injury, that is not easy. And you could tell he kept himself in pretty good shape. Like he's pretty trim right now. He actually lost weight while he was injured.
It's just all about the wind. It's about wind. And it's about the whole thing. That's why I was so excited. Like I'm an Embiid lover. I have to say, I admit it. I love the guy. I would fight all the time when people say trade him. I never wanted to do it.
You and me both.
And
you get a lot of those around here.
I know. And listen, I understand frustration, right?
Mm-hmm.
I understand, the injury situation. I understand sometimes body language. He could sag at times. I get it all. But his sheer greatness and what he brings is unparalleled. There's only a handful of guys that could in this league that can create the space that he creates on the floor.
I mean, we're talking about a guy who was putting up Wilt Chamberlain numbers earlier this season for essentially like half the year, was putting up numbers that we haven't seen in decades from any player, let alone a big man. Super efficient, 35 points a game, 11 rebounds a game. He's passing the ball better than ever. He's playing not quite defensive player of the year, but elite level defense on top of that too.
Yeah, he's giving you effort, like big effort on that side of the floor. Even the other night, like early in the game, he went after somebody's shot and he actually fell to the floor. But he went after,
and we're all holding our breath.
I know.
He comes off for 2 months and he's flying around everywhere.
Right, but to me, I love that kind of effort, and I do think, and you're around him every day, like he's different. Like he wants it. Like he wants his place. And when you see in this league, those guys want their place among the best, right? And they want to win. Man, they're all paid extremely well, so it's not about that. It's about that pride, and it's about the ego piece of it, which is I'm one of the best in the league. I want to win.
And look, I think one thing that he also takes more seriously now than he did early in his career is the leadership component too. Like, it's one thing to be, hey, he's sending texts to guys while he's in rehab and saying, I see this, I see that. But when you're back in the trenches with those guys, first thing he did, I'm in the locker room after the game. The first thing we see him do is he's sitting at his locker talking to Buddy Hield saying, hey, man, I saw there were like 2, 3, 4 open looks that you had that you didn't take. You got to let those fly, and saying, I'm going to get doubled. I'm drawing all this attention. You have to be ready at all times. And so already stepping back into that vocal, like, hey, here's what I see. And those guys will follow him, right? He's a good enough player. He's got enough respect from not just the guys in the locker room, but around the league. What he says goes to a certain degree. So it's great to see him back just on the floor, but to also see him leading this team already.
That's a big component, man. By the way, it's 9:30 here on the Anthony Gargano Show. Kyle Neubeck, and of course, we're brought to you by TrueMark Financial Credit Union. We love our TrueMark Financial Credit Union. You got to check it out, and you can see what the difference of a credit union. Learn more about the credit union difference at TrueMark Financial today. Big news of the day is the Sixers and Miami and chasing the 7th seed.
And maybe even, I think the 6th seed is probably out of reach, but Indiana lost to Brooklyn last night.
Yeah.
That's a bad one to give away. And Indiana and Miami actually play over the weekend. So that's one where you root for the Meteor to hit the gym and wipe both of them out and the Sixers go past them. But yeah, tonight's big because if you're assuming they can't get the 6, which I think is probably fair, having home court for that potential 7-8 play-in game would be huge. Not just because the home court advantage here is amazing, but also with Joel on the mend, if you can keep him in your home facilities, he go through his normal process getting ready for a game, I think that's better than having to travel to Miami.
God. Well, not to mention when you look at just the difference of what you can play. I mean,
yes.
I don't know about you, but I think it's pretty obvious. You at least want the 7th seed.
Oh, I mean, that's undeniable. Yeah.
It was funny. I watched a little bit of Boston last night, and I had the Phillies on. I got like all the games. I'm going back and forth. They're just playing ridiculous right now.
They're really good. I mean, like, eye test says that. The numbers say they're a historically great team, potentially. Now, they got to do it in the playoffs, obviously. But then the other factor on top of that, and you know this better than anyone, the Celtics just always beat the Sixers. Like, they have that franchise.
They haunt us.
They have no fear of the Sixers at all. Like, even the best periods in Sixers history, right? When Wilt was here, Doc and Moses are here. The Sixers won like 1 title during those times. The Celtics are winning 6 and 7 titles or 4 titles or whatever it is. So
I can give you chapter and verse on that whole thing because I'm a little kid, right, with these wide-eyed and a big fro like the Doc, like I wanted to be. They were so good, like so good. In 1981, Moses, of course, beats the Lakers. And then the Sixers, we felt finally they were going to win the title, right?
Yeah.
They're up 3-1. They blow the 3-1 lead. And Boston wins it, and they go on to win the title.
Yeah.
Right? And, of course, the following year it's the reverse. And then you had the Sixers break through. But after that, every other it was the Lakers or the Celtics. And then the Pistons. That was it. And you just lost. And it was supposed to be our era. Like you always hear, like the documentary of the 80s. Yeah. It's Lakers and Celtics. Where are the Sixers at? Sixers are relegated with the Bucks.
They're the little brother team.
Yes.
And so I think there's the historical baggage, but there's also the recent stuff, right? Like Jason Tatum and Jaylen Brown only know beating the Sixers in the playoffs. They've had, like, when Kyrie Irving was injured and it was Ben's rookie year, it was like, oh, this is an opportunity to go to the finals. People are looking way far ahead, and then they get punked in 5 games.
Well, you know what's funny? Like, that was the one series that I forgave.
Yeah.
Because you're right, it was Ben's rookie year. That was the Euros. Remember that? That was the whole, the Euro connection.
Yeah.
And Brett actually had the team that he liked because they just firebomb threes and play defense, but They bombed threes. And they were in the game. Remember, they were actually in those games. They lose in 5. You go, all right, they'll be back. Oh, God.
And we've been on the same treadmill ever since.
Oh, God. The bubble blowout in the first round, nobody played. That was ugly. I mean, till last year.
Last year was the crusher.
Last year was the worst.
Especially because Joel's hurt to start the series, and Harden steals you game 1 in Boston. Paul Reed's knocking down clutch free throws in the final minute. It's like, oh, they got to get this one. And then I've said this many times. That game 5 win in Boston last year, to me, in my head, that was like, oh, this is the moment. They're finally breaking through. They had the team. Harden got them a game. Joel's back. And Joel and Tyrese, that game 5, played an absolute masterclass, the two of them, and just took
Harden
their hearts.
Right.
A great floor game from Harden.
Right.
And you're like, we're going back to Philly, and they're winning this series. Like, it's over. And then D'Anthony Melton misses like 100 threes. They just can't put it together. And obviously game 7 is game 7.
The biggest issue, though, was Harden because he was horrendous in game 6.
That's happened a few times in big games.
in game 6, he was horrendous. Like, and that's the theme that Legs and I were talking about, right? Yeah. Because you don't have the Ben factor or the Harden factor. As great a player as he is, when he sags, the whole team sags, right? And like when he's not getting his, when he didn't have burst in his legs, it killed him. And now you don't have to worry about that because with Maxey and elevating Maxey, you're never going to get those emotional lows that you had with those other two.
He's very even keel. Now, I would say the concern I would have is that this is Tyrese's first year as like you're the guy on the perimeter.
Yeah.
He's still the number 2. Like Joel's going to get the most attention, but he's going to get the top perimeter defender on him from any team you play in the playoffs, and they're going to make him work to get absolutely everything he has. I think he's shown this year that he's taken a leap. He's a better scorer, better playmaker, better point guard, all that. But it is still going to be a big test for him to start the playoffs.
But you know what? It's actually the perfect kind of year for it because it's a house money year.
Yeah.
And he's not one, like, you know, Maxey. Maxey just plays. He plays with this incredible, unbridled
100%.
joy, right? And he doesn't feel the moment.
He's one of those that I think he loves basketball so much that it's even in those pressure situations, he doesn't care. That Hawks series, that's the one that really gave away against Atlanta a few years ago.
Yeah, it's Ben not passing up the dunk.
But when they had that horrible blown lead in game 5 and everyone's like, oh, they're going to Atlanta to die, I think people forget now. Tyrese, who was not even playing, gets thrown into the rotation in game 6. He basically stole them game.
He did.
Joel and Ben both played bad, and rookie Tyrese comes in and saves the day.
Did you were at the Heat, the game 6 where they lose to Miami, Harden's first year.
Yes.
What stood out in that game as they were going out was that Harden quit and Joel quit.
Yeah.
And the only one who was still playing at the end was Maxey.
And he is... I'm hoping, anyway, that Philadelphia has had a lot of hope for young players in the past, and they go off the rails or what have you. I do think Tyrese is someone to put your faith in.
Talk about a curse. They just don't. Think about this for a second. You have Simmons. It's like inexplicable. Like he shows you incredible, possibilities.
Yeah.
And then it's a complete flame out. Do I need to say Wentz? Right? Same thing.
I mean, we could just stick with the Sixers. Markelle Fultz was like, oh, he's the slam dunk #1 pick.
But it's one thing if they stink.
Yeah.
Right? Like if they just are a bust.
Yeah.
Like that happens. But Simmons and Wentz, oh my God.
You saw something. There was some awesome flashes.
Wentz is an MVP candidate.
Yeah.
Simmons was an legit all-star. And was a good player, great defender early in his career before he goes, goofy. And then the other one is Carter Hart. Throw him in the mix too, right? Like, God, oh my God, it's so ridiculous. But that's what Maxey, I think, is, and we'll knock on wood, but I think Maxey is immune to that.
Yeah, and look, all the good things that fans and people on the outside hear about him, I think it's times 5 to all that. He's just walks in with a smile on his face every day. Everyone you talk to, people that aren't connected to him at all, or hear stories about how hard this kid works, and he's just so dedicated because he genuinely loves it, right? Like, I think one of the things with Ben, in hindsight, we could say, it's like, I don't know that he really loves basketball. I think he's very good at it. And I think he has worked a decent amount to obviously become the level of player he was. But that plateaued. Like, once he gets the contract and he's in the league and he's comfortable, that's not Tyrese. I think Tyrese is truly dedicated to the grind and the craft.
Ben loved the life.
Yeah. He still does. He's taking, selfies by the Eiffel Tower when he's sitting out of the Paris game,
I know. It's like, don't you... That's where your basketball pride has to kick in, and that's...
Any kind of pride, for that matter.
Right? That's the whole thing. By the way, the big story of the day, presented by TrueMark Financial Credit Union. Check out TrueMark.com/PHLY, or stop into your local branch to learn more about the credit union difference at TrueMark Financial today. So I got two things for you. One, the supporting cast and how you look at the rotation going forward. I like the Buddy Hield thing excites me with Joel. I mean, that's what was in Daryl Morey's head. Like, you see it, right? And you know that you have a guy like Nick Nurse that can design a lot of great movement with all that spacing.
Yeah, so Buddy has been a little bit disappointing for me over the last several weeks. But to your point, the reason you get him,
that off. Yeah.
The reason you get him is to play with Joel. One of the big wild cards, frankly, right now is, do you get DeAnthony Melton back at all this season? He's one of the few guys on this roster that's like a genuine two-way player, someone you can just put in all different types of lineups, very flexible. He's got enough length to guard wings, but he can still defend guards as well. So if he comes back, you're really bolstering the rotation. Like, Kelly Oubre, been a fan favorite lately. He's a big X factor heading into the playoffs. I think he's playing some of the best basketball I've seen him play in his career. And when you have a 6'8" athletic guy who can defend, who can score, and is a streaky shooter.
How long have they missed a wing?
They traded Iguodala, and they basically have had no real wing since. So I mean, Tobias Harris is a big swing guy too, but I think everyone, including myself at this point, has kind of given up on him. It's like don't rely on him. You hope for the best, you expect the worst.
You hope you get like 2 or 3 games in a series where he plays well, but you that's it.
Yeah, but I do think this year and this potential playoff run, assuming they do make it, is going to be a test case for, can you just do a 2 stars and a bunch of role players team? Because Daryl Morey wants to hunt stars. He's a big 3 type guy. Get as many of the top end guys as you can. But if they can go on a run, if it's Joel and Tyrese and Buddy Hield, Batum, these guys who just sort of, they fit perfectly, hand in glove fit as role players around Joel, maybe they reassess and say, let's just go the role player route from here on out.
Well, it's interesting because if you look at, say, Denver, right, that's really the 2 model, right? It's Jokic and Murray, and then you look what's around them, and it fits.
Yeah.
Right? Like, they have the perfect, Porter Jr., right? Like, the perfect.
Aaron Gordon was one of the sneakiest, biggest trades in recent NBA history.
I mean, it's interesting how it's all played out, where the big 3 has not panned out. I mean, the whole Harden, KD, Kyrie, like,
those guys are
right. They're on another planet. Yeah. But when you looked at those 3 together and what they would, and any kind of iteration, look what's going on with the Clippers. Like, I don't know. Like, are you going to count on that team?
Well, because that's a big 3
in the world.
It's a big 3 on paper, but it's really Kawhi Leonard doing the heavy lifting. And to your point, in the new collective bargaining agreement, the league has actually made it harder to build these 3-star teams. The further you get into the luxury tax and the salary cap, the more penalties there are. Like, you can't sign buyout guys. So if you need that extra addition after the deadline, that's not possible anymore. And so I do think we're heading into a 2-star reality in the future.
Which I like, because I just look at it and go, it's more about team building.
And it's better parity too. Like, you won't see one team win 3 or 4 titles in a row just because they have 3 stars and they just refill the role players every year. So
I'll ask you, like, who's on your target list? Like, when you're looking, and because we always love to do this. I mean, I think about it all the time. It's such a unique situation where you're going to have your two best players, and that's it. And you get to fill in around them.
Well, so the pipe dream is my co-host, Devon's cousin, Mikal Bridges, if you could convince them to let go of him in Brooklyn. The problem is they've already turned down, allegedly, offers of like 5 first-round picks from Houston, and other teams have been sniffing around him. So one of the main problems for them this summer is that the actual free agency market has already kind of dried up.
I know.
Guys have moved.
Wasn't it weird?
Anunoby, Siakam.
Right? It was wild because look, when we projected this year, 2 years ago when we were talking about this, you were like, oh my God, it's a batter free agent class. It's going to be incredible. And it really is the raisin.
Yeah. So Paul George, speaking of the Clippers, is probably going to be one of the top names on the market.
I know. I don't want him.
And look, I do think
he's a great ball player.
Best version,
I don't trust him.
And that's the thing, right? The best version of Paul George is a hand-in-glove fit with Tyrese and Joel. Amazing 3-and-D type guy who can create, who will shoot at volume, which is something Tobias does not do.
Yes.
But he will also go through a month and a half, 2 months of the season where he's passive, he's shooting the ball poorly, and so that's a big risk. He's like 34 years old.
Well, that's my issue. Is that you're getting a guy in his mid-30s who you can't always count on.
Yeah.
And I agree with you. Like, when it comes to his skill sets are perfect. Like, he fits the skill set between Joel and Tyrese perfectly. But we got one shot at this thing. Like, this is it. Right.
But that's the thing. Like, it might end up he's the best and only real option because if you don't sign somebody, they still have to sign a bunch of guys with their cap space, and then it's gone. So this is the moment, and I get it. We've talked about Paul George on the Sixers show, and there's been a lot of pushback. I get it, but it might be the best of the bad options. We'll see.
Because you have to use, and that's the key.
Yeah.
You have to use
it. Again, it doesn't have to be they sign somebody. It can be, hey, maybe you trade for someone, you absorb that contract, and you just give up picks and
that's
and
the
whatnot.
Bridges.
So,
that's the Bridges, pipe dream.
Yeah, of course, the best option is a guy you drafted and traded away.
Dude, if I told you this process is just taking years off my life.
You and me both.
So you don't even know this. Man, this is years ago. I was going to write a book about the process. I still have
I would absolutely read it. I'll tell you that.
So I was like traveling with them. I think I saw you a bunch of times, like, because I was traveling. I was behind the scenes. I was on the planes and the whole thing. And I have stacks. I have files in my computer that are just voluminous. It's encyclopedic. And it just became...
And that's just the list of players that played for him during that time. It's a new guy every night.
But all the storylines and plot lines and turns and twists and everything else, like what kind of drama and Okafor, like things that you forget would happen in Boston and all kinds of craziness. And Brett Brown and the dinner in Utah with Jimmy Butler. Like, it was nuts.
There's a whole heck of a lot that was going on. And there still is,
now it doesn't
frankly.
matter because, until they win it, it doesn't really mean anything.
Yeah, it's funny. They went through that whole ordeal and rebuild to get out of the middle, and now they've been stuck in the second round for 7 years.
I was all for it. I raised my hand, and I thought that
me too.
That was the only way to do it.
Honestly, part of the reason I have a career is because I was for it, and that was like a part of the movement.
Yeah, well, I'm glad you do. Because you do a great job. What's your schedule today?
So we will be on post game after the Heat game tonight. So I'd estimate 10 o'clock-ish.
Perfect.
So our night owls, anyone who's up now and will be up later, I'll see you then. Everybody else, I'll also see you then.
That's awesome. I'll be watching. You do a great job. You guys are killing it on the All Sixers channel. We appreciate it, brother.
Thank you very
Kyle
much.
Neubeck, who is just fantastic. I'm a huge fan of his. All kinds of stuff.